Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and I'm going to be talking about g.l.o.w Season 3, Episode 4. It's called Say Yes. So, full spoilers for the episode as always. And of course, thank you to our sponsor for these g.l.o.w reviews, Tim Neal, one of our patrons, who sponsors us at the $10 tier. And apologies for the big gap between episodes 3 and 4. It's been a very busy week, which you can probably tell if you're paying attention to the YouTube channel and just how much content's been going up this past week. But we're here now, and we're going to talk about episode 4. It's the one where Russell has come to visit Ruth, and all the hubbub that spills out from that. We see that together at the start. There's a sort of montage at the start with the drag singer that we'll get to. But we see how the relationship with Sam that Ruth's having is kind of bleeding into her actual relationship and showing up and manifesting in a number of little different ways. For example, when they're lying in bed, she rolls over and sees the watch that Sam gave her, and it kind of gives her this little moment of pause. And she kind of reacts by immediately saying to Russell, hey, when I get back, we should move in together. We should look for a place. And he's caught extremely off guard, and his response isn't very enthusiastic or confident. It's very like, yeah, I mean that could work. Yeah, he doesn't sound exactly impassioned by the idea, but it's clearly from Ruth's perspective just a mechanism. It's just she feels guilty about thinking about Sam, that she immediately tries to make this relationship more serious, almost to prove to herself that she's committed to this. And it's actually almost the exact same thing that happened the first time they kissed in season 2, where she kind of started this relationship with Russell in the first place, or at least made it official in the first place, because of what happened with Sam. So at the time, I didn't necessarily take it as she was trying to veer herself away from Sam, as it was just, in season 2, I thought, oh, that moment with Sam kind of made her realize she did want this, and now I'm not as convinced, because now I'm watching this scene and I'm like, no, she is using this to try and convince herself that this is what she wants. And they go out for the date. They're going places. There's a brief encounter with Sam, but they're going to a pawn shop, because pawn shops in Vegas are the best, according to Russell. And he's like, oh, there's cameras, and he's all looking at cameras, and Ruth, again, has a moment where she's staring at some watches, and the guy who works there is like, hey, are you looking for a watch? And she's like, nah, and she explains too much. Like, she's so nervous, and as if she's just been caught doing something, that she over-explains everything. And she's like, I'm here with my boyfriend. He's like, oh, so you'll want to look at rings then? And she's like, yeah, everyone likes rings. And then he pulls out just this, this little case full of engagement rings, and she's like, oh, no. But he talks her into trying some on, and again, kind of a running joke in this episode is that Russell keeps seeing signs that Ruth is wanting to take this relationship to a much deeper place, and he turns around and he's looking through the camera through the viewfinder, and he just sees Ruth wearing like 5 engagement rings at the same time, and starts to freak out a little bit. And again, to recommit herself to this relationship, she immediately offers to buy him the camera he's holding. Again, out of guilt, out of like everything she does for Russell in this episode up to a point is out of guilt. In fact, later that night, when everyone's going to the drag show, to the Bobby Barnes' drag show, like, they weren't supposed to go to that. They were going to go to dinner. But when Ruth hears that Sam let Sheila read some of his script, something that he did not let her do, she immediately is like, no, we should go to this drag show. It'll be fun. Come on. And she only wants to go so that she can interrogate Sheila as to the circumstances of which this happened. And of course, this leads to the drag queen sort of like coming down and berating her for talking and like kicking them out because they're supposed to be having a romantic weekend and they're at his show. It's a whole thing. Basically, Russell accuses her of being obsessed with Sam, and they have a bit of a fight, and then amusingly this random couple who just got married wants him to take their photos because they can tell he's a photographer because he's got a camera around his neck. And they ultimately kind of make up, and they kind of admit that they've been kind of crazy and that there's a lot of pressure on the weekend on the visit because they've been talking every night, and it, the distance makes it harder and all the normal things. Obviously, we still think there's truth in why she was feeling this way. I'm not convinced that this is at the end of this and that everything's all fine now. Not by a long shot, but they do make up and agree to be more healthy. Maybe just talk every other night if talking other nights making them crazy. So, straightforward enough. You've got Debbie. Debbie is having sex with more people who work at the hotel, which later leads to some jokes, both at the drag show, where Bobby does make some jokes about how he can't get his bags taken up to his room all week. So there's just some funny jokes like that, and then later on, Debbie doesn't let you go downstairs because she's had sex with both the valets and the bartender and like whoever else, so she can't go to certain places because it'll be awkward. Because she's trying to give advice to Cherry, who's clearly been having a rough time, is playing loud music. She's getting high. She's been very antisocial. She gets angry at them at the show for suggesting new things. Debbie tries to make her feel better, but ultimately it's this bonding moment where Debbie kind of admits that sometimes she thinks it would be easier, her life would be easier if she never had a child. It's kind of this moment for both of them where she's whispering, and Cherry's like, "You don't have to whisper. It's fine." It's fine. It's just me, And she's got sharing some advice, because like Debbie actually says that she in part had a kid because it was to stop her husband leaving, and that's kind of Cherry's lying there saying, "Oh, I want Keith to stick around." So she's giving her some solid advice here. Is don't just do it for that reason, like. Giving her some experienced advice, I guess would say, because she has had a kid and her husband has left her, and she's been through all this. And again, there's a lot of amusing stuff in here. The idea that she's left a juggler in her room and that he'll leave when he's hungry is just a fun little line. As is all the jugglers and magicians throughout the episode, which are really good stuff. Bash is so entertained by the thought of by the thought of a magician. Early on, they're having breakfast in Bash's room, and it's the three producers, it's Sam, Debbie, and Bash, and the waiter turns out to be a magician. Waiter's not the right word. He's room service, but he's making things go on fire. There's a card trick where Bash's card's in the orange, and all these different things. It's and the great thing is that Debbie and Sam don't give a shit. Debbie's like, "I just want more food," and Sam's like, "Yeah, it's on the glass is on a string that he's making levitate." They're just being cynical as shit. And Bash is like, no, we'll put him in the show. We'll put a magician in the show. We'll do some magic stuff. So it basically, word's gotten around that Bash is a very easy producer to work with, and he pays well. So throughout the episode, we also get a scene where he goes into the elevator and there's a couple of jugglers, and he's like, "Jugglers, are you kidding me?" And he's got this big kid grin-like smile on his face as the elevator doors shut, and it's just, and then they open as the elevator's done, and he walks out handing them business cards. So we see this kind of go throughout the episode, which is obviously building up to a big thing that happens towards the end with Bobby. Because, of course, the girls have all waited to see the drag show, and after the show, the Britannica, I always forget her actual name, Rhonda, that's the one. Rhonda brings back Bobby to the hotel room, and he's out of costume. He's just dressed as normal, which is important because Bash doesn't realize what type of show he did. Rhonda never mentions it was a drag show, and he's like, "Hey, I make, people have been, word's been spreading. You've been, giving some jobs to people and arranging things and representing people. And okay, can I make you a pitch?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he's like, "Hey, so I do this show, and people are being turned away at the door, but I can't get a bigger room. People screw me over. They'd be happy to see me out in the gutter if I wasn't making them money." Which is a reference to his lifestyle and the idea that the people who he works for aren't necessarily fans, but they just keep him employed because they like his money. They like the money that he makes for them. And obviously, Bash never quite get that. Bobby does make one subtle reference to him also being gay, and Bash acts very awkward about it, and Bobby kind of apologizes when he realizes he stepped over a line, but it does make this awkward thing. But he's agreed to come see the show and see if it's something that he would be willing to produce and put on a bigger venue, and so on and so on. And we get like the second number, the sort of musical number, if you will, from the Barbra Streisand drag show, where we get this song again, and again, much like the start of the episode, we see like the ending of all the plots wrapping up. Russell leaving in the cab, and all the other endings we've had to the various plots. And there's this great thing where you don't realize this while you're hearing it or watching Bobby on stage, but when the song finally ends, it cuts to a silent room, and it's just Bash sitting at a table on his own. This has been a private performance to try and win him over as a producer, and he just, after a moment of silence, utters no and stands up and says, "I don't think this is a Bash Howard production." And he the way he delivers it is very, very telling. I mean, we've been saying how kind of closeted he's been since season 2, and the way that he married Rhonda was almost kind of like Ruth with Russell is proof that trying to prove that this is what he is, this is who he is. Here, the idea, like, he'll hire jugglers, magicians, but the idea of doing this show, he can't bring himself to do, because it's hitting too close of a chord with him, because it'll make him look quote unquote gay, right? That's what he's worried about. And he says, my wife does want some singing lessons though. Do you remember her? And the way he says it is very, very confrontational. He's really making it clear, like, hey, you thought I was this, how dare you? I have a wife. Remember my wife? And like, it's this kind of harsh moment. Now, we do see at this point that Sheila's also there. Sheila's like sitting over at the bar, and we should go back a little bit to when the girls first came to the show, because Sheila was the last person that Bobby spoke to while on the mic. Cracked some jokes about Debbie, cracked some jokes about Ruth and Russell, and asked Sheila where she was from, and Sheila wouldn't give her a straight answer, was very confrontational back, and basically we have this great bonding moment here where Sheila, refused to talk to her on the night, but after this confrontation with Bash, goes backstage, and Bobby's clearly upset, sort of throws his wig off. He's very, very kind of hurt by the rejection that he's just faced, and Sheila says Baltimore, and she's like, I'm from Baltimore, and sits down. And what's wonderful about this, because obviously there was a scene with Sheila as well where she was with Sam, and Sam was like, hey, do you want to read the script? And it's a western, but it's about a dad and a young woman who turns out to be his daughter, and it's obviously very much him and Justine. But Sheila critiques it by saying that the guy has all the good lines and the girl just like listens and asks questions so he can have more monologues. It doesn't quite add up, and he gets very defensive. And then she asks Sam, like, do you think I can be an actor like this? And he's like, it's good for a wrestling show, but I mean, no actress else was ever this. And this hurts her feelings. This goes back to last episode or 2 episodes ago when she was in the acting class and she got very defensive because she felt she was being victimized for who she is. And while I'd still sort of stand by that, if you're acting, you have to act in different ways. You can't just act like yourself. The beautiful at the ending of this episode is that Sheila in this person who, because Bobby at one point says, like, when he was himself, he didn't feel comfortable. He couldn't sing, was the way he put it. But when he was Barbra Streisand, he could sing even better than her. And Sheila has basically found someone who she can kind of connect to, because Sheila does not just be her normal self. She puts on this persona. She puts on the wig. She puts on the furry wolf pelt or whatever it is she's wearing. And she is this persona that she's created for herself. And Bobby says, "Have you ever? When was the last time you washed that wig?" And she just kind of shrugs, and it's like, like clearly, maybe never. So Sheila willingly takes it off and gives it to him, and he puts it on the little wig holder. What do you call it? Little mannequin head. You put the wig on. Is there a name for that thing? Puts it on the wig holder, the bald head, and starts brushing it for her, and Sheila sort of has a tear going down her eye as Bobby starts asking more questions, starts asking, so hey, whereabouts in Baltimore? And it's this idea that both of them have their wigs off, so they're both exposed, and they're both their vulnerable selves that they don't really like people seeing, because they feel more confident in their personas. And Sheila has found someone that she can relate to and understand, who can understand her in a way that maybe most people can. And it's a very beautiful scene because of that. So this is a really good episode, largely because of this plot. I was kind of worried in the opening scene when we had the music number. I was like, oh god, we're going to have lots of these music numbers, because I'm not a huge music number guy. Let's be honest, it's not my thing. Cat hair. Or a beard hair. I don't know. Sometimes it's a cat, sometimes it's my beard. I can't really tell. If you listen to the audio version, I just pulled a hair out my mouth. I just want to make that clear. The video people saw me do it, but you clearly didn't. So what's interesting, Justine is still credited on IMDb as a regular, but this is now 4 episodes out of 10, and she's not been here. So we'll see if Justine appears soon, because you'd expect she will. I look forward to seeing her again. But no, all the plots in this episode, and I think the one that I've maybe neglected, there's a scene with oh god, Carmen's brother, is here, and he's like, hey, why are you here doing this same show every night? Like, you could be on the road with us and be like a real wrestler. And she's like, no, the girls need me, and kind of thing. But it's maybe setting up the idea that she has a future in wrestling and beyond g.l.o.w and beyond what this is. It's just a sweet little scene between them. There's not much to it, but it's very effective. The episode's really solid. Obviously, there's some fun stuff that comes from, like, Russell keeps thinking Ruth's into, marriage and moving in and everything else. And we have humor from all the Debbie and Cherry stuff. Debbie especially seems to be in a lot of funny scenes in this episode. But the heart between Bobby and Sheila at the end, and the idea of two people who are vulnerable connecting like this is a really great little plot, and it has a lot of heart to it. And I think Bash basically disguising his vulnerable self and convincing himself that he's not any of these things, whereas these two people are clearly still suffering, and it's still very hard for them to be what they are in the world, but they have at least tried to be what they are, and they're connecting over this. And this is something that Bash doesn't have. He doesn't have someone that he can be this honest with, because he's not been honest with himself yet. At least that's the impression we get. If we get some other swerve here and I'm completely wrong, then fair enough. But this is the gist I'm getting up until now. So now, really solid episode. I'm excited to see more of Sam's script. I'm excited to see where some of these plots go. No Gina Davis again this episode, but I do like that it kind of filters in and out, because there was no Melrose this episode, for example, or a few of the other girls. Again, there's the A tier of like cast who we see every episode, and then the rest of them kind of like rotate in and out for the subplots, which is fine, which is fun. It gives them a little chance to shine. So there you go. That is episode 4, season 3. I promise I'll be back with episode 5 much quicker than I was 4. So let me know what you thought of 4 in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates, or you can get me on Twitter at Wibble89. You can also, of course, support everything we do and keep the content coming by going over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv. We can support us for as little as $1 per month. Obviously, the higher tiers you get to sponsor us, like Tim Neal, the sponsor of this show, does. But go and do that. And check out the other TV shows we're reviewing. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?